Good evening, and you're very welcome to the third episode of the League of Ireland Women's podcast here on FinalWhistle.ie with myself, Breifne Earley, and of course, as ever, Aaron Clarke. I'm knackered, Aaron. It feels like a month since we last spoke, and it's only a week. Some weeks we really struggle to fill the hour on this show, but today we're going to be really tough to get this inside 60 minutes because we have so much going on. Yesterday, of course, the FAI launched their new women's football action plan. Hannah Dingley, the head of women's football in the FAI, was in the Mansion House. We're going to hear from her sections of a pool interview with a load of journalists yesterday in the Mansion House. We're going to hear from her. It's been well documented across the various news websites and the major TV stations as well about what it means about new facilities and about pushing forward the women's game. We're going to talk about a lot. A little bit underwhelming. We might get into that in a bit more detail in just a little while. We'll also be talking. We spoke earlier during the week to Nicola Sinnott, of course, no stranger to anybody who follows the league, a former multiple-time league winner and FAI Cup winner, possibly one of the most decorated players in the league in terms of definitely not the most, but definitely one of the most decorated players in the league. We speak to her at length about her time at Wexford and I suppose the 10 years before she even signed for Wexford as the Wexford native hangs up her boots and takes a little bit of a break from the game. But as we probably say to her later on, it's something that we expect not to last that long. She's going to be very much in demand in terms of her expertise. And then so much more news to talk about as well. We got to talk about Athlone Town. They've had some issues with work permits, all resolved now. We believe a bit of a storm in a teacup. Just the paperwork didn't get through in time for last weekend's games. A few players missed out in that game, but we believe both from other media sources and from a couple of contacts within the club that has all been resolved and they'll all be part of the squad if available this weekend. So that's good news for Athlone Town. They, of course, host Shamrock Rovers, who themselves in the last hour have been in the news. They've signed none other than Irish international Roisha Littlejohn, and I don't know where they got that idea from, but I saw it mentioned somewhere on social media over the weekend. Somebody put a question to Collie O'Neill. Who was that, Aaron? Can you remember?
I love his answer. It's one of them that it's mad for the league, and like you talk about being exhausting. Jeez, I even find already the amount of times we've spoken this last week or we've gone through stuff ourselves. It's mad with football being back, how busy life gets and how exciting thing gets at certain stages and things.
Your dog is getting excited there as well. He's just so excited to see Roisha Littlejohn join the League of Ireland. It's going to be a big signature signing for them this season. Potentially the signing of the off-season, actually not even potentially. We talked about some of the big names that moved clubs last week on the show and the week before, but this has to be the biggest name of the lot. Played in the World Cup recently, was starting for Ireland in the last international window. I know we've spoken about whether she still has it or not. I think at this level, she's going to absolutely clean up. Not to put too much pressure on her. There's going to be plenty on her over the next couple of weeks, but she could be the difference between Rovers having a title challenging season or not. Would you agree, or am I being a bit too ambitious there?
So I said Rovers were going to finish 7th last week, and the one thing I said is Rovers lacked experience. There's experience in abundance with the amount of games she's played at a high level. It's probably exactly what they needed. It'll go one of either two ways. It'll be amazing. She'll light the league up. She will run amok, or it won't work out at all. There's no in between. It's going to go one of the two. She's actually the great thing about Roisha is it's the character that she is as well as the player, and I think that'll attract people in itself to go and watch games, to get an opportunity to go and watch her. Like even me, I was time of going to a different game on Saturday, going to go watch the Dubs Saturday evening, and now I'm sort of like, do I have to go to Talent on Saturday evening? It's that one player alone sort of. But like, it's great to see the league getting that bit of exposure, that bit of push, and there's no doubt she'll bring in, like, it's probably the worst kept secret in the last week in terms of everybody's been talking about it without Shamrock Rovers commenting on it. And like, I understand from a club viewpoint not wanting to comment on it, but the people who actually in the know, the ones who kept them out quiet from Shamrock Rovers, I'd say it was probably hard because I'd say they were getting pestered.
Yeah, well, you pestered Collie after the game on Saturday. His comment was, "We don't talk about signings, we announce them," which I thought was absolutely class.
What a quote!
Collie. Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. But listen, delighted to see that announcement tonight finally come out, and we'll see Roisha for this season in the league anyway, and see how she gets on in Shamrock Rovers. I think it's a big statement that we're obviously attracting a player who's on the international stage, bringing her to the league. I'm sure there's a financial arrangement in that, in the fact that the league is now a professional entity, and Shamrock Rovers is probably one of the biggest spenders in the league at the moment. That's fantastic as well. I think it's great to see us being able to attract those caliber of players that might have been looking around the Championship or even the National League or other outlets. Like, she is Scottish. She could have gone back up to Glasgow. She could have gone back up to some of the clubs up there, and she's chosen the League of Ireland, and that's absolutely phenomenal. Let's keep our eyes on Shamrock Rovers for the moment, because they absolutely nailed it on day one. They looked like they were going to get beaten by the defending FAI Cup champions, Shelbourne, but they pulled it out of the bag in the last couple of minutes. What a way to wrap it up 5 minutes into injury time in Talca Park. Shells kind of looked shell-shocked at the end of the game.
Yeah, like the funny thing about it when you sort of look at this game was the fact that Shells took the lead after 50 seconds, came in nearly a carbon copy of the goal they scored in the President's Cup the week before with the close range header. And you're sort of thinking, okay, Shells might go on, they might dominate here. But the one thing from a Shells viewpoint, and even talking to people at half time, not many people were overly impressed with Shells in the first half, in the sense it was quite sloppy on the ball. It wasn't fluid. It wasn't what we'd expect. You really notice when Alex Cavan is not there in that Shelbourne team, the difference that it makes. And when it got to about 60 minutes, you're thinking, okay, game is still in the balance here. Shells have a tendency, if they're sort of level or one up around 60 minutes, where it gets a little bit nervous. And when Katie O'Reilly finished that goal, you sort of think, okay, game on here. What way is it going to go with 15 minutes to go? But then Fiona Owens, it's only her second league goal, bombing up the right flank to get on the end of the ball from Anya O'Gorman. And you're sort of thinking to yourself, you're like, 95th minute, the right fullback is still trying to get up here and get there. And the Shells, probably a bit of a sucker punch. It would be a bit to lose that game. A draw, they'll probably feel a little bit aggrieved, considering the amount of chances that they sort of negated. They negated Rovers. The Shells could have had a second goal. Noel Murray had the ball in the net, and it was ruled out for a foul on Katie Keane. I probably thought it was a bit of a soft foul for me, but you just look at that and you sort of think, when Rovers equalise, you're like, can they snatch it? And when they did snatch it, it was like, it's mad. But even speaking to Collie after the game, he was talking about how the players are back earlier, how they're fitter. And he seems to be really invigorated and really vibrant about, or really happy about the group that he has. And it's something, don't get me wrong, it's not the most, not necessarily talented group, but it's not the most group of superstars. But there's a lot of young players there, and you take into account the likes of Anna Butler, Ella Kelly. There's 3 or 4 of the Shamrock Rovers players who probably would be in and around that first team, not even available because they were away with the Ireland under 19s. I saw a great stat after the game, and it was something that I was aware of, but I just when I looked at the points per game, it probably wasn't as. Since Shells have come in, Rovers have come back into the league, they haven't beaten Shelbourne in the league.
Wrong way around. Shells haven't beaten them in the league.
Sorry, Shells haven't beaten Rovers in the league, and you look at it, it's a case of even Talca Park. They've drawn twice, lost one. For Shells, that's unusual. That's unheard of.
But wasn't it something like they've got 0.6 of a point on average against Rovers versus 2.4, 2.5 against everybody else?
2.44, I think it was, against everyone. That's an astronomical stat. And yes, they've won the cup games they've won some of the FAI Cup games against Rovers, but they've not beaten Rovers in the league, and this is their third season back. It's surprising from Shelbourne, but you could just see the way Collie O'Neill had that team set up. I do think they're probably still nowhere near where they need to be, but it's a team that's going to improve week on week, game on game. If that front three can click and score goals, Joy Ralph, Emily Corbett, and Anya O'Gorman, they could score a lot of goals. But your only concern when it comes to Rovers is that when they have Joy Ralph out wide, or they have Emily Corbett out wide, does it really work? That's the only concern I would have from a Rovers viewpoint. But there's no doubt there's a lot of goals in that team.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can get firing on all cylinders. I'm going to keep you at 7th because that's where you initially predicted them. But if I did give you the opportunity to redraw it, without going into any other detail, where do you think they're going to finish? Are they now top 2 or top 3 with Ruisha in the squad?
They're definitely top 4.
Okay. We'll move on.
I don't know.
I know it's very early in the show, but I'm very aware of the clock. So let's keep it rolling. Athlone Town, we touched on their international clearances and the work permit issues earlier in the show. We won't get into the nitty gritty of that because I think it's been resolved, and I think it probably was blown up into something that it necessarily wasn't really what the impression that we were given from social media on Saturday afternoon. But how scary is it for the rest of the league that even with that late withdrawals from the squad, issues about availability of players, they still comprehensively went out and really pushed Wexford aside, really didn't give them much of a chance in that game at all, with effectively missing 2 or 3 of their first choice players?
To be honest with you, when you started getting news of that coming through, you're thinking, oh no, not again. It's a horrible look for the league. It's a horrible way for the league to start in that sort of sense. And like, we don't know the ins and outs of exactly why there was an issue, what caused the issue. I think from an Athlone viewpoint, they'll be disappointed the way, because it dominated everything, and everybody was talking about it, even in Talca Park, what's going on, because when you see the tweets coming through, it's frustrating. But for them to get a result on Saturday was monumental. You look at the squad they had, struggled to fill their bench, but like to get that win, that's gonna do no amount of confidence just because of the fact of what's actually happened. Lovely goal from Kayla Brady. Said she on this show, she's one I think who will do really well for them. And walk away 2-0. Yeah, if you're Athlone Town, Colin Fortune and Gordon Bright, you have to be extremely happy with that. Wexford, I still wouldn't turn around and say I think Wexford off after that defeat. I think Wexford will come on. Wexford will come on from it. It'd be interesting just to see how much time it just sort of takes them to settle with the new management. But from an Athlone viewpoint, listen, what a start considering the circumstances. And I think if you'd offer them a 1-0 win, a kick-off, they'd have taken it and run.
I think so. Peamount United 2-0 winners over Cork City. Good start for Peamount, 2-0 up, scored 2 goals in 4 minutes, just a quarter of an hour into the game. But couldn't really push on from that and never really looked like threatening to score another one. In terms of the league, job done, good start for the new management there and onwards and upwards, or is it a worry that they couldn't put more past a Cork side that we've seen maybe struggle in these games in the past?
Bit of both, but you'd also have to give Cork a little bit of credit as well for the fact that like Cork came back into the game, they must have the ball cleared off the line 2 or 3 times. Yeah. You look at the second goal in particular from me. If I'm the Cork defence, I don't want to see that back from the kick out, come straight to South Doyle around the corner, past to Becky Watkins and finish. Like the goals that Cork conceded, Frank Kelleher will be very disappointed with. But the fact that they didn't just roll over, concede 6 or 7, you're sort of thinking at that stage, okay, yeah, I'll be a little bit happier. But then just to sort of look on your point, then like at half time, the Peamount took South Doyle off, so they weren't really taking any chances in the second half. Karen Duggan didn't start the game, and didn't even come on. So it's one of them that you're sort of thinking, yeah, job done for Peamount. Won't really complain too much now. Karen Duggan, South Doyle only playing 45 minutes. I think they'll be happy enough. I think Frank Kelleher will be quite happy with some of the aspects of what he saw from his side, that they didn't come and just roll over and concede 6 or 7. Because when you see that they conceded 2 goals early on, you're probably thinking, a really long day here for Cork, isn't it? How many are Peamount going to score? And thankfully, from a Cork viewpoint, they didn't have that happen.
I think Cork 3 or 4 years ago would have probably ended up on a really bad scoreline there. So yeah, it's a good start for, I suppose, both management teams. Be relatively happy, albeit in defeat with Cork City. Let's move west. Galway United 5-1 winners in the end against DLR Waves, but they made it really hard for themselves. A rough first 45 for Phil Trill and his side down there, but a double from Aisling Meany and Emma Doherty got them out of jail really down there, but they really had the firepower in the second half. DLR just couldn't live with them.
It's a massive difference between two sides, and when you look at that, yes, DLR scored the penalty and made it difficult in the first half, but I said to you last week, if Galway are to have a successful season this year, I think Emma Doherty has to hit the ground running and score a lot of goals, and to get 2 on the opening day of the season will fill her with massive confidence. I think Aisling Meany is probably somebody we don't necessarily talk about enough. I think Aisling Meany is probably going to be vital to Galway, and yeah, Phil Trill will be a lot happier with the second half than he will the first half. But listen, the other side of it is when you look at these sort of fixtures, the first day of the season can also be tricky. You can play all the preseason games you want, but preseason doesn't prepare you anything really for the opening day with the different types of intensity. So I think Phil will be happy enough. It's a 5-1 win. They're on top of the league after week one. You've got to be happy if you're Galway.
Yeah, speaking of struggling on the opening day of the season, Bohemians went down to the west as well, down to the showgrounds in Sligo, probably expecting to come away with all 3 points based on, I suppose, what the expectations going into both sides. Definitely from the viewpoint we had over the last 2 weeks, Alvin Heiss is going to be really disappointed not to have done that. But Sligo, well worth the fight, well worth the performance, had their chances as well. Scoreless draw in the end. Nothing that either is going to be particularly writing home about over the next few weeks as the season progresses. But a solid start for Sligo. That's a good point against a team they probably weren't fancied to get anything from.
Yeah, and the biggest thing from a Galway view, from a Sligo viewpoint, is can they build on that? Can they build that little bit of momentum? Not fancy to get anything out of a game. Like we even said last week, all eyes and all pressure was on Bohemians going into that game. And for Sligo Rovers, you look at having Cork City and Waterford in the next 2 games. Realistically, we could be talking in a couple of weeks of them easily having 7 points on the board, or they could either have 1 point on the board or they could have 7 points on the board. They have 2 games that they can win. And I think for them to get off to a start, yes, it wasn't a win, but to get a result against Bows, it doesn't necessarily answer the question of are they the Sligo Rovers that finished the end of last season. We'll need to see a couple of weeks before we can really assess whether they're the Sligo Rovers that finished the end of last year or the Sligo Rovers that or a different Sligo Rovers. But it's a good result for them. Bows, I think, will be bitterly disappointed in the fact that they've been targeting this game to get off to a really, really good start, and going down to Sligo and not picking up a result. It sort of puts them on a foot that, like, they have a big game this weekend. They have another big game next week. Like, if you look at the next 4 games for Bows, they've got Galway, Wexford, Athlone, and Shelbourne. Like, getting off to a good start was key because they could easily lose all 4 of them games, but they could easily pick up results in all 4 of them games. And it's one of them that I don't think Alvin Heiss will be too pleased when he looks back at the game that they didn't. But you got to give the credit to Sligo Rovers.
And the final game I have left on purpose as the final game because for me, it was actually the game I enjoyed the most over the weekend. Waterford United, new girls in the league, made their debut, got a lovely presentation from Treaty before the game, welcoming them to the league. Treaty then swiftly turned around and spoiled the party by scoring 2 goals. And for me, the player of the weekend, I know she played a few games in last season with Treaty, is American youngster Isabella Fluccini. I had no idea how she didn't make it into the team of the week that came out from the league this year. She scored an absolute belter of a goal in the second half. Made Maeve Williams pull off an unbelievable save in the first half after a lovely piece of skill down the left hand side on a breakaway attack from Treaty, and also set up the opener for Katie Lawley as well. I thought she was the player who had the most influence on any one game over the course of the weekend. No idea how she didn't make the team of the week. I know I picked her out when that first chance happened, and I tweeted, says this girl's going to make an impact in the league this year. And then 10-15 minutes later, she hits the back of the net. So so for me, that was the highlight of the week. Treaty would be delighted. It's a good start. Waterford won't be too disappointed. They held their own. They look decent in parts. If they can get a bit more consistent in terms of 90 minutes, I think they'll take a few scalps. And I still stand by where we have them in their predictions for the league table. But for me, that was the game of the week.
I think we need to do a bit of digging on Fluccini. I'd love to know what happened last year, because she played 3 games from the 25th of May. She played the 3 games in a row, then played an All-Ireland Cup quarter-final, played a league game then after that, and then just hadn't been in the squad since. I'd love to know from a Treaty viewpoint what happened there, because there's no doubt she is going to have an impact on the side this year. An assist for Katie Lawley, a lovely finish from Lawley as well. Took it very, very well, and then her own goal was superb. You could probably say goalkeeper caught a little bit too far out in that one, but I think you'd be doing a disservice if you tried to blame the goalkeeper, because I think Fluccini, the way she struck it was a really, really nice goal. Treaty, it's a good start for them. It's a really, really good start. It's the sort of start they would have wanted. But I do agree with you. I do think Waterford have the ability to pick up some results and pick up a couple of scalps this year. But like, even you look at, like, for Treaty, they had a horrid start to pre-season where they lost the Bows, Peamount badly, and then they sort of started to pick it up, and a little bit of momentum really does help. And like for Treaty, I think they've a good side there, and I think realistically, if they can win this weekend against Steer Waves, we may be talking about, can they go up a little bit higher than where we probably predicted them. But positive opening day for them. But for Gary Hunt, I think there's a lot of lessons that will be taken from it, but there's not necessarily all negative. There is definitely positives to be taken from that. Yes, it was a 2-0 defeat, but you can definitely see that they're not a bad side, Waterford, thankfully, and I don't think we'll wait all season to see them pick up their first victory.
Absolutely. Let's move on. We'll come back to the games next weekend at the end of the show, but let's talk about last night, because the FAI announced their new women's action plan for women and girls over the next 2 years, from 2025 to 2027. Hannah Dingley, the Irish, I suppose, the head of women's and girls football in the FAI, was in the Mansion House in Dublin yesterday to launch it. I was at the event. I know you've had a chance to look at the plan. We'll maybe show the plan and then hear a little bit from Hannah, and then we'll chat about our thoughts on it, rather than kind of setting the tone, let people make up their own mind on it. But this is essentially, it was 19 pages, but this essentially is the genesis of the entire piece, and it's all about keeping girls playing football from those vital teenage years when we see huge dropout rates. There are plans to really empower women to be part of their clubs and part of the structures of football across the country, in those pathways for women to become these future head of football leaders within their clubs, their leagues, and the association in general. And then also on the performance end, to create high performing environments specifically for female players. And there is 19 pages. It's worth taking a look at if you can get your hands on it. I'd imagine it's been put out by the FAI themselves. It has it fairly well done. We're not going to show too much of it, but essentially that is the page that kind of sums up what they're looking to get out of this. We did speak over the course of the evening. We spoke to Hannah as part of a pooled interview with a couple of other sources. It's been well reported across the country, but we're going to take out some snippets. Dave Kelly from The Independent opened the proceedings, and he asked her about Tier 2 of the National League and how that potentially might look.
Just before you do,
yep,
it is available on the FAI website, and if you go to FAI Ireland on Twitter, it's available there as well.
Absolutely. So do take the time to read it. It is worth reading to see what the plans are for women's football going forward. But here's what Hannah Dingley had to say about Tier 2. We'll come back to other topics after this piece.
The thought with Tier 2 is the academy systems. So currently, I think we've got about 20 clubs that have got 17s and 19s or both, but no seniors. So if I talk about retention of players, they're potentially going into academy system for 2 years sometimes, and then there's nothing for them. So the second tier, I think, is a really key piece in terms of that progression and keeping girls in the game. And again, if you don't want to compare to men's football, there isn't that sort of intermediate football. There isn't that next step down as much. So it's potentially a bigger drop for them in terms of the competition that they're getting from their League of Ireland academy experiences. So that's a key piece of the puzzle. But obviously the piece in the action plan is, I don't know if you saw Shell's actually recently came out with something on the weekend with International Women's Day again around a lot more consideration about the fact that we have female athletes and menstruation and there's a thing called REDS, which is about so a lot of girls will train a lot, not eat a lot, not fuel themselves possibly, and then have low energy, etc., and that can have a really long-term negative impact on them. So our understanding of that and our support of that, initially, as I say, we need to lead and we need to get that right in our international spaces, and that will filter down into obviously the League of Ireland, into other environments.
How does this plan compare to the last plan?
Good question. I think we've tried to be, as I say, I'm going to say nimble, because obviously we have a lot of plans, and we have quite long plans, and we have plans, that have a lot of factors, and we really wanted to keep it really succinct and clear and focused. And actually, sometimes you look at the action and go, wow, I've given yourself a lot to do in 2 years. But the idea is to keep focused, and again, that is nothing against other plans, it's just making sure that we have a clarity of what we're trying to achieve, and does that project or does that thing have that impact on the keeping girls playing, retaining teenage girls, keeping coaches in the game, then we know it's the right thing to invest in and spend our time and develop.
Now, so that was Hannah speaking about the new proposed Tier 2, which isn't going to happen anytime soon, but it's about filling that gap between the end of the under-19 academy structures and the Women's League of Ireland for the clubs like Longford, Dundalk, Drogheda, Cove. There's maybe another 8 or 10 that have those under-19 structures, under-17 structures that don't have a senior team at that level, but we've a whole pile of players coming out of that system that they need somewhere to go to. So quite positive, I thought, in terms of including that in that. Aaron, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so, and it's something that we've said quite a bit over time is, where do these players go when under-19s is finished, especially if you've only got, realistically, to many, you've got 12 teams, so you've got 5 in the capital. You've got 5 in the capital, just using Dublin as an example. Where do the rest of them go? Do they just filter off into different sports, or some of them give up playing soccer, or some of them don't even? And like, if you can have other avenues or other leagues or other things to help in terms of the likes of a Tier 2, I think it would help. Likewise, I think it would also encourage players as well to, be like, okay, I'm not good enough at the minute. If I work hard, I can play in this, I can get an opportunity. And at the minute, it's yes, it's an elite league on paper, what we have, but it's only a small minority of players that are, how would you say, at a top A grade, and the others are sort of filling in squads and stuff like that. So I think it's a good one. I think it's something that could work over time, but again, as we'll probably talk today, is everything is going to be about things and no real when, if, how much, all that sort of stuff.
We'll touch on the actual targets and metrics later on in the clips that we have from Hannah. We have about 7 or 8 clips, but this one is about her main focus over the next 2 years is purely about the provision of facilities and catering for women and girls within current club structures across the country.
That needs to be on number 1 agenda. If I can write your headlines for you, can you put that on number 1 agenda? That, and it needs to be, and that needs more than, I suppose, just me or just the FAI. We need, a collective push, in my opinion, in all sports, to make sure that we give equal opportunities for women and girls to play sport by providing female changing facilities. So yes, drive it, push it everywhere we can. And that's what we've been saying internally. That's what we'll be pushing literally to say to government, to councils, to anybody who'll listen, because it's so important, and for a number of reasons, for women and girls, but also for safeguarding, and if you think about young people and adults in the same spaces with no toilets, think of girls who are on their periods and don't have sanitary bins. It's such an important part, and we really want to be pushing that, and it will keep more girls in the game, and it will encourage more girls to play our sport. Have
you had direct feedback from clubs or players that that's an issue, that's part of the reason that they're dropping off?
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. Obviously, we've done some recent sort of consultations around the new FAI strategy. Number 1, it comes out facilities, and obviously everyone's pictures. Everybody likes a nice 3G, but everyone's recognising the importance, and particularly, here we talk about Dublin. There's a lot of council-run facilities. And it's just a grass pitch. We need to be able to provide more than that if we really truly want to get girls and boys active, because it's not necessarily a good environment, safe space for them to be playing.
And the voice of Dave Kelly in the middle of that interview as well, just following up on his original question. These questions coming from a range of journalists, so apologies if we don't name check them all. I know Neil O'Riordan asked one. I'm not sure if we included his response in that. There was also some there from Mark Gallagher, Emma Duffy as well from the 42. So lots of people contributed to this pool of interviews. It has to be said, we don't be claiming credit for other people's work on this, but you can't disagree with any of that, Aaron. Surely facilities.
So one thing for me, I see this, and I've seen it so often. I've seen players having to go use public toilets in clubs because there's not enough female toilets. Like a lot of these facilities that are being set up, even in the League of Ireland grounds, are set up for males, where you've got you've got urinals, you've got stuff like that, where there's not enough female toilets. Simple things like that.
You spoke at the weekend. You told me a story of what you witnessed the weekend at a League of Ireland ground.
Yeah, and I've seen it happen on other League of Ireland grounds as well.
Tell us what that is, because the listeners won't be privy to that.
Players having to go and use the toilets that the fans would use because there's not enough toilets in the dressing rooms. To me, that's a basic. For an elite level player, female player, they should not be having to do that. And I've seen it happen in many clubs, and it's not good enough.
But the reality is, I know it's a cost involved, but maybe it's at the stage where we don't put urinals in dressing rooms. We put in 4 cubicles in the same amount of space, and it caters for both. Like, because we can all use a cubicle. I mean, it's no big deal on that. But the girls can't use urinals, so we have to be accommodating and that. But that's it. It's just about thinking with an equality based mindset, surely.
But a lot, and I'm not going to bash the clubs here, because a lot of these are the women's teams never played at these grounds before. So it's a case of the facilities were there as they have been for the last 10, 15 years. And a lot of the women's clubs are now coming in to use the facilities. So it's a case of, yes, they need improvement, but it's not a case of the club. I don't think it's a case of the clubs being like, you know what, we don't care. It is a costing. A lot of it is a costing. And hopefully over time that will change.
Yeah, we're going to move on to some of maybe the issues around the plan that was launched yesterday. And I suppose there was a lot of talk in the room prior to the Q&A about a lack of clear targets, a lack of clear, measurable, quantifiable outcomes from this. That was put to Hannah in the Q&A with the media yesterday. Here's what she had to say about it.
The future head of football, that programme, like, do you have a number of girls that you'd like to get involved in that? Or?
Yeah, so we've set some internal figures. I was very cautious probably not to put them out in the world, only because sometimes what we do is we do programmes for numbers. So we want to deliver X programmes. So we'll deliver 50 programmes. Tyler can tap herself on the back of delivering 50 programmes, it's wonderful. But actually, what impact do those 50 programmes make? So when we sit here in 2 years' time and you're judging me on that, what I hope we really say is, well, look at the experiences. We'll have a look women who are sat on committees who can give you their experiences, can tell you the support that they've been given, can tell you how it supported them. We have girls who will be playing football who will say that their club is hopefully say their club is more our inclusive place, and how the environments have changed and how they've been supported. And that is the real impact that we'll have, is those women's and girls' experiences, and we will be hearing their voices. So rather than saying, let's stick to a number, I'm saying it's more about the quality and the impact that we'll have, rather than to do the figure.
You talk about specific metrics not being part of this plan. How can you gauge the success if you haven't set specific metrics? And I suppose, how can we gauge success looking in from the outside if we don't know what the targets are for the next 2 years?
Yeah, we have set internal KPIs.
KPIs, Jesus.
KPIs. So somebody's saying a performance review and tell me if I've done it well. But as I say, what I really didn't want to do, and it's not that we're shy of sharing them, it's just that they become the focus. The focus becomes of, have you delivered 50 programmes? And I actually think, well, does it matter? I could have delivered 50 rubbish programmes. Doesn't matter. Actually, is there the impact? Have the women who have taken part on those programmes felt supported, felt that they've improved, felt that that's helped them to get into senior positions? You know, that's the measure. And, you know, we talked a lot about it, you know, whether we should start to measure, you know, girls' confidence, you know, from the recreational football sessions, for example. Do you come out more confident than when you came in? Because it's not the number of sessions that's important, it's the impact that it has on those women and girls that we're trying to impact.
But then, rather than setting a KPI as the number of sessions, maybe it's the percentage of clubs that have that female officer on their board, maybe it's the percentage of coaches that are female across the women's game. Can you not pick KPIs that reflect the outcomes you're looking for? We can, but we're still in the process of, obviously, the club mark process. So all clubs trying to be mandated to be club marked by the end of 25. So I could set a target now that would change potentially, you know, within a very short amount of time.
So once we're in a better state with that, I think it would be clearer, because once we know all the clubs are club marked, then we'll know they all have football committees, then we can audit who has a female on that football committee, and then we can set clearer targets. But I suppose this has come slightly, coming out at the same time as club mark. It makes it hard to set that as a measurable.
Yeah, some interesting back and forth there at the start of that second clip on the KPIs and the metrics. The mention of KPIs brought a kind of a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe just a note from the assembled media, and a comment from one. We won't mention the name, but a comment from one that kind of brought a laugh, and even Hannah herself was thrown a little bit. And it kind of the whole kind of session from there, she was a little bit more guarded, and she didn't deal with the questions from there on in as well as she possibly could have, in terms of that topic, because there are no measurable and achievable and quantifiable statistics or targets in that plan, which is a problem. And like, I don't know of any job where someone said, oh yeah, just empower people and inspire people, and without having some sort of metric. And as the person who also was setting the metric in the plan, I kind of felt she should have had more on that, in my own opinion. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. You weren't at the event. You're listening to that for maybe the second time. You probably got a sneak preview of it last night. But your thoughts on that whole situation of how we measure the success of this plan in 2 years' time.
I'm just more thinking, I got to write this plan. And thinking, because this plan is, to me, it's worthless unless you've got measurables, what is attainable. Like in my walk of life, if I go into a business review meeting and I'm asked about, okay, what are you going to do differently, or how are you going to change things? I'm going to be asked to set targets. I'm going to be asked to set goals, whether it be short, medium, long term. There's nothing in here. Everything, there's no time frame. There's no nothing. There's no measurables. And I don't know whether you're mentioning it, but there's no financials. How much is it going to cost? What's going to cost? Like, it's just as if this is being written. Okay, there's a lot of bang, 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 bang about us having strategic plans, us having this for women's football. To me, there's nothing in this that actually makes me think, okay, women's football is going to be in a better place in 2 years' time. Like, she said something in the clip there, talking about measurables, about measuring how people come out of a session, how confident to come out of it. If I have 5 friends playing at a training session and we're all having a laugh together, we're all enjoying ourselves, I'm going to tell you I had a great session. I enjoyed it. I loved it because my friends are there. Doesn't necessarily mean the coaching was great or the work that was done was great, but I'm going to come out and enjoy myself because I've had people there, I've had a laugh with friends. It's just as if it's like, let's get this on paper. The detail is lacking massively, and nobody can actually judge this plan because we don't actually know how it's going to be done, how anything is going to happen in it. And it's a case of, I'm no further forward than I am backwards yesterday when reading and listening to the clips from Hannah Dingley.
Yeah, no, I have to say I agree with most of what you've just said, if I'm honest. The only thing I disagree with is I think you wouldn't have written that plan. I think given an afternoon with myself and maybe a League of Ireland player and an international player, we'd have something a bit more concrete, probably at the same cost. It's very, very weak, in my opinion. And I spoke to a couple of the journalists there yesterday, and we just couldn't understand what the actual specifics coming out of the plan were. It's very, very light. Now, speaking to a few people from the FAI at the launch yesterday, the vibe was that this is a filler. This is a gap that needs to be filled between the last plan, which ran to the end of last year, and for the next 2 years until the FAI come out with a fully researched and funded and costed plan. Now, they did say, I haven't got the clip ready, but she did say that this was fully costed and funded, but that there really was no resources available to back it. So it can be fully costed and funded at zero or very, very close to zero. There was no specifics about funding. There was a lot of hyperbole about women in sport funding and other avenues of getting funding for this, but no specifics about what was required, figures, or where that was going to come from. And I think it's a bit disappointing a year in that this is all we get, if that makes sense. And I don't want to hammer. I think the actual plan itself, when you look back at it, it's aspirational. It's and if we can achieve some of what is there, I'd be delighted, absolutely delighted. And she seems like a really nice person. She seems like a very pleasant person. She seems very approachable. She's very pleasant to be in her company. and I think she will get stuff done. I do think she will get stuff done. She will tick the box. She'll get a passing grade. Is it going to put us, as she claimed yesterday, as one of the elite organizations to follow in world football in terms of how we treat women? I don't really believe that's going to happen.
Like if I look at slide 17, developing women's international football, like the get feedback from past and present and senior and international players is their action. There's no action of, okay, we need to have X, Y, we need to have this, we need to make sure that underage teams play this amount of games, there's this amount of, and like I look at, say, for example, Dave Connell. Dave Connell's under 19s qualified for the Euros last year. You look now, you can see Ireland 17s are away at the minute. The 19s team, which have a core group of players where you'd expect 5, 6 of them maybe come into that senior team over time. The lack of game time that they're getting in international level, where the likes of the 17s get more games, the 16s get more games. I don't think we'd even, and the FAI even prioritize the right things. And you'd ask the question is, when they're spending money, are they spending it correctly? Or are they just spending it because they think it's the right decision? And like, if you're saying there's no finances available, they're reliant on Sport Ireland, they're reliant on other sponsors and other things to come in. How do you make sure that when you are spending that money that you do have, that it's spent correctly and it's used correctly to utilize? Because at the minute, it's difficult when you look at the FAI, because I think a lot of people say they don't have confidence in the FAI at the minute, the way football has been gone. And I know Hannah Dingley's getting a lot of stick off the back of this, but I think there's other people in the FAI who've probably done a disservice to women's football and the way things have been done. Likewise with the men's football, the way stuff have been done in the last couple of years, that are probably should be more in the spotlight. She's trying to do something here. Whether she can get the finances or she can get it to be done, it remains to be seen. But I'd just like to see a little bit more meat on the bone here in terms of what detail they want to achieve, because there's some great things that they've sort of name dropped, but it's all about how do you do it.
Absolutely. Listen, we've run out of so much time to talk about that discussion. We have had a few clips left about maybe the role of university sector. I asked her about that. A very satisfactory answer on that as well, where she hadn't really thought about it, but would intend to include them in a discussion piece going forward. The subject of Eileen Gleeson's role within the organisation came up. That was slightly interrupted by an FAI source who kind of confirmed Eileen's role as being employed by the FAI, but not in Hannah's department. It wasn't handled well by Hannah or by the FAI, just in terms of how that worked. But there was clarification in the end as to how that was going to be. And it got a bit uncomfortable for everybody, both the FAI and I think the journalists in the room at the time. But listen, these things, we know this from the FAI. Sometimes they don't just deal with the problem. They kind of let it linger longer than they should. And it's not the current FAI's issue. It's been a long-standing thing over decades with them, just letting things fester beyond the point where it becomes pull-backable, if you know what I mean. Based yesterday, it's very hard to see Eileen Gleeson having a role within women's football in this country beyond the end of her actual physical contract this summer. So it's going to be an interesting time to see how that pans out. That's just my interpretation of it. That wasn't from the FAI, but interesting times ahead. Let's move on. This show was meant to be about a career celebrating Nicola Sinnott's 20 years at the top of the Irish domestic women's game, capped by Ireland against the US back in 2015. I think she said herself, you'll hear it in the interview, 4 league titles, 4 FAI Cup titles, a Shield and a League Cup, which most youngsters don't even know existed back in the day. We spoke to her on Monday night. We're going to hear from her now. So maybe let's let Nicola do the talking for the next half hour or so. Oop, wrong one. Where did I put Nicola? I think I've actually stopped her. So let me take that off. Add to stage. Here we go. No sound. From the League of Ireland Women's Premier Division with Wexford and plenty of other clubs in her past. We're going to get into all of that over the next 20 minutes or so. Nicola, very, very welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me back on. No
problem at all. It's been a pretty stellar 19 years, I'm going to say, in senior football. You kind of predate the league itself in terms of your interaction at this level of the game. Of course, that one solitary international cap as well against the world champions of the USA to count in that career, to a couple of league titles and FAI Cups. you must be looking back kind of nostalgically over the last couple of weeks, over the last 2 decades or so.
Yeah, it was only when I obviously had made my decision, and it's when you kind of start scrolling back through photos and looking back through the years and see what you have achieved. You suppose you don't realize until you actually step away and look back what maybe I have achieved. And I'm very proud of the different successes I've had with Wexford and the different experiences I've had through the years. Obviously some with just obviously club, and then in and out maybe internationals as well. So yeah, I am very, very proud of what I've achieved. And and there's probably a bit of sadness looking back through some of the memories as well. And they're obviously memories and experiences that you can't describe, and it's something I'll obviously cherish forever.
How hard is that decision to say, enough is enough?
Yeah, it's very difficult because obviously I've probably been playing soccer since I was probably 8 or 9, and it's something I've done, every single year, every single week since then. And I suppose it's part of me, or it's almost like an identity, when I suppose locally or in work or anything like that, when people know me as Nicola, the soccer player, and you kind of suppose you look at yourself now and you think like, what am I now? You kind of re-question everything and who you are, because it takes up such a big part of your life, and as I said, it's so much part of your identity as well. So it's a big transition, and it's probably something that I'm going to take time to kind of find my way through and navigate through, and find I suppose new interests and different things to take up my time.
Yeah, they say when a footballer retires, footballers kind of die twice. They die when they retire, and the kind of whole world kind of changes for them, and then obviously at the end of your life. But how has that process been for you? Because obviously you haven't been involved with the league, hasn't been around for the last 4 months, and now you're back in. You're looking at the team. You've seen them on TV the first week. Was there any little bit at all was like going, God, I would like to be on that pitch?
Yeah, obviously when I first kind of knew I was making a decision at the end of last season, I was like, I suppose I was okay with the decision during the off season because everybody else is in the off season, and then pre-season starts and you have people ringing you to see why aren't you at training, or I suppose you were thinking I was just going to turn up maybe a week or two later, and I suppose you do start to question, have you made the right decision? Because that's the first time where I've maybe knew the girls were meeting up, and you kind of get this fear of missing out and what's going on, or you don't see what's going on in the group chats anymore, or what they're working on in training. And then obviously this weekend was a challenge as well. It was weird looking at the girls I played alongside for 13 seasons at Wexford, walking out on the pitch, and I'm sitting at home watching on the TV. So that was a strange feeling, and a part of me does wish I was there, but then I feel like I am happy with my decision. And I suppose it's because you have such a love for a game and it's been such a part of your life for so long, you'll always miss it. I don't think even if I played for another 5 or 6 years, I don't think it would be ever easy to step away. I think you're always going to miss it, and you're always going to miss the people and the friends you've made for life from it. So yeah, I think I'll always miss it, but I am happy with my decision, I suppose.
10 years ago, Wexford won their first league title. 277 appearances you made it in the Women's League of Ireland. How do you pick a highlight, or how do you look back at that time? Because you've won a lot of trophies, a lot of competitions, played in Europe, played with some really, really good groups, and you've probably watched people who were kids coming into the club mature and become really good friends with a lot of players in that team.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult, and I've grown as a person through all those, I suppose, as you said, 10 years ago since we won our league as well, and I'm different as a player and a person, and as I said, I've played alongside many, many players. It's really hard to kind of like put it all together and look back at it. Even like to say Rihanna Jarrett or Ciara Roster, like I've known them since they're 16, 17, 18, and they're turning 30 now. It sounds a bit crazy that I've known them for that long and played alongside them. And a big part as I've grown older has been more about, obviously we've been very successful as a club and we've been very lucky in that sense. And maybe when I was younger, it was all about, I suppose your goals is to win, and not that my goals ever shifted away from that, but it definitely, the enjoyment was a bigger factor as I got older, and it was the people that I was playing with became more important to me as maybe in the last couple of years, whereas I didn't really take that into account as much when I was younger. It was more about, I suppose, trying to achieve success. But it was definitely more special with Wexford winning those, we won 4 league titles, 4 FAI Cups. I think it's 2 Shields and a League Cup, and it's definitely more special when you win those things, as playing alongside your best friends, and the relationships and the friendships that I've built up from our first, I suppose, league win 10 years ago.
Do you look back now, kind of those 20 years, and kind of look at the route you took to get to that level? I suppose your first FAI Cup final was in 2006, so it's almost 20 years ago. But do you look at the route you had to take to that level that wasn't available now? If you know what I mean? That wasn't available then, but it is now in terms of the youth pathways through the clubs, through the National League, and is there a little bit of envy that maybe you would have liked another crack at it with all these systems in place?
Yeah, like definitely when I was a teenager, I like many, suppose, girls playing our league now, I was obsessed with soccer, and all I wanted to do was play soccer as a career, but I didn't really have any, suppose, opportunity for that. Like locally in Wexford, I think Wexford League is one of the biggest girls leagues now in the country, and there wasn't any underage teams when I was a teenager, so I just trained with boys till I was maybe 16. I think I played with the Wexford Academy under Jack Stafford was the coach at the time. And then I suppose my first senior experience is when I went to college in UCD. So that's obviously when I was 18. So it's a lot different now than what the girls have in the academies and the access they're getting to the coaching now. So it's a lot different. But it's part of me now. I wish I was 20 years younger to maybe have the opportunities that's in front of a lot of girls, even the changes with setups, the professionalism now, the access they have to different range of coaches, nutrition, S&Cs, analysis. Like none of that was around when I was younger, or, it just took an exceptional coach maybe to bring it in at the time. So yeah, there is part where I do look back and wish I was starting all over again to maybe get the opportunity to make a career out of it. But I am where I am now, and I suppose all I could do was trying to relay my experience and any advice I have for the young girls who are in that position now, who may have great opportunities ahead of them.
What do you, when you talk about all of that, and you talk about, if you could do it again, what is it that the likes of yourself, Kylie, what is it you tell these younger players now? Because, you experienced it all. Success doesn't happen overnight. It's a lot of hard work. What is it, the message that you'd give to them younger players now who have that opportunity now to go through this pathway?
It's just not a given to expect it. Like I feel maybe there's a different mindset with young girls maybe when we were 16, 17, 18. I think when we got an opportunity when we were 16, 17, 18, we had to work very hard for it. And, when we got in around older players, we listened, or we held on to every word they said. I think maybe I think society and difference. I see it as a school teacher, the young girls are different coming through school. And I think they have to, not feel like that it's just going to be given to them. They really have to work hard. And, just because they've maybe just signed to a senior squad, it's just, they haven't just made it yet. There's a lot of work to be put in, and they have to work a lot with the team they're in and with the people around them, learn from the people around them, and then put the work in outside the pitch as well. I just feel like it's something that's maybe needs to be said more to younger girls, that, it's not an entitlement, I suppose. There's a lot of work that they have to put in, and just because they've made, as I said, signed for a senior squad, they haven't just made it yet. There's a lot of work ahead of them.
In terms of the influences on you, Nicola, both, I suppose, on the pitch and in the dugout around you over those 2 decades, who are the major people when you look back and say they played a huge part in me getting to where I got to?
In regards like coaches and...
Yeah, or players around you.
Well, so obviously I'm going to mention Kylie. Like she's obviously she's one of my best friends now, but aside from that, like she's definitely an inspiration that I've had from, and someone I've always looked up to, even playing alongside her. She's the way she's kind of led Wexford and has such a huge influence on and off the pitch for the team, and she's been huge to our success. She's definitely someone that I don't feel like I would have developed as a player, or we wouldn't have had the same success as a club in Wexford only for her. So she's definitely played a huge role. And as I said, she's definitely someone I've looked up to throughout my whole career. And then obviously I've been very lucky to have a lot of coaches over the years as well. My first experience, I suppose I'm referring to Wexford mostly here, but my first experience in Wexford was with John Flood and Lizzie, and they, we were huge underdogs at the time. We were down the bottom end of the table, and we won our first kind of league cup with them, and they really instilled a belief and just like a doggedness and a hard work ethic amongst the team. And I think that they instilled that early on in Wexford, is something that we've tried to carry through up to now, and I said, like, instilling the younger girls as well. And I've had a range of coaches. Will Doyle was definitely a coach I learned a huge amount from as well. He was a perfectionist with everything, and he challenged us, and definitely made me look at the game in a different way. Like, we learned the game inside out. We learned every position inside out. We were like, regimented in everything we did. And, I think that was shown by the success we had as a team under Will, even though maybe on paper we didn't have the caliber players as other teams, but we were hugely successful as a unit, I suppose. And, Tom Elms, Stephen Quinn, all have played a huge part as well in my career, and they're definitely people I'll stay in contact with, and I've learned a huge amount, and I'd love to work alongside some of them again.
I'm just looking at a photo from your social media right now. It's the one from Tala Stadium when he's won the playoff. There's yourself, Emma Hansbury. These are all other players. Becky Castnall running towards you, Kylie Murphy right beside you. What did it mean, though, to sort of win with that group? Because you talked about underdogs, you talked about things. When Wexford won their first league title, it sort of changed a massive shift in terms of the league dynamic, because the trophy had come out of Dublin after a couple of years with Peamount and Raheny. What was it like to win with that group?
The first league was very, very special. I think we won it with maybe 4 to 5 games to go. We actually beat maybe it was Raheny at the time in Morton Stadium, and I don't think any of us ever believed it. We arrived that game, obviously just taking the game in front of us, and I think we won 2-1 in the end. And we couldn't believe we won the league. Like, not that you'd ever be thinking about celebrating. Like, we never even thought like there's a possibility of us winning, or what are we going to do after, or the bus journey home. And at that time we just took it game by game, and I just remember that night like it was one of my best memories for Wexford. It was a great group that we had. As you said, like, we were complete underdogs, hadn't really achieved much regards where we finished up in the league table in the years previous to that. I don't think anyone ever gave us a chance that year. And as I said, maybe on paper as well, compared to other teams, we didn't have so-called talent or the caliber as players, but I think we showed that it's more than just talent, and if you can get a team who fight for each other, believe in each other, and all the other qualities that we brought that year, it really makes a huge difference. And I think there's a shift in that sense that it probably gave some of the other teams as well, outside of likes of Peamount and Raheny, who had only been the winners at that time, maybe gave them belief and something that maybe we put out there that maybe they could copy or follow, or try to achieve as well. So it was a really special group, and the first one will always be a great memory.
Talking about first as well, Nicola, I suppose big games, you've played in a good few of them over the years, but probably none more so than that tie against PSG when you were at Peamount. You started both games. I suppose we won't talk about the result necessarily, but the fact that you qualified for that stage of the Champions League and really put, I suppose, women's football on the map. I know Steph had just scored that goal maybe earlier, or maybe that actually was after, but
I think maybe,
just after. But you really kind of, for the first time, we started seeing women's football on the news and on the sports bulletins. It's kind of commonplace now, but it didn't really happen ever back then. Maybe the cup final got a mention, but that was the first time it was like the media in general were interested in women's football. What was it like being part of that at that time?
Yeah, it seems like a distant memory now. So it's was it 2011? Was it, or 11? Yeah, it was huge. Like, obviously, just even at the time, I think RT came out to one of our training sessions and obviously wanted to interview the girls. Like, that was, as you said, very, very rare back then compared to now, and obviously the coverage that the league has at the moment. So it was a huge thing, and it was maybe just highlighted maybe the level that a lot of girls are playing in Ireland, and a lot of people locally would know. And I played with Peamount, but maybe didn't understand the what League of Ireland actually meant, or National League actually meant, or what Champions League meant. And maybe a lot of people didn't even know that there was a women's side of the competition. So the coverage that Peamount got that time from obviously qualifying for the next round was absolutely huge for the game, and maybe it was a starting point. And obviously it was good timing with the league, obviously starting very soon after. And I said maybe it was what got the ball rolling and the interest in the women's game as well. And maybe it's obviously improved since then. And yeah, so that was a huge moment, obviously, for club soccer, I suppose, in Ireland.
Like, you look at that, and then you look at, say, the cup finals being in the Aviva, the cup finals being on television. Like, could you have dreamed even back then how far the coverage would have come? Like, even seeing 14 games live on TG4 this year, would you ever dreamed of that?
Never, no, never. And I suppose back earlier on, like, it was, and it's not a goal to get to a cup final now, but it was such a, a big thing to, obviously, firstly to play in the Aviva, and then knowing that it was going to be on RT. It was the only game of the year that would be on RT, and it was, I suppose, you're nervous about it, but excited that people at home and friends and family could obviously watch it, and people could see what you put all your time and commitment into. And yeah, it's definitely, and I would have never thought the league would have grown into where it has now, and obviously the number of games increasing every single year. You said it's 14 obviously this year, which is absolutely massive, and it's absolutely huge. It's something that we would have dreamed of when we were younger, and maybe you always hoped it would get to this position, but maybe never believed we'd have the backing and support. Like, we fully believe, I'm sure, and obviously you're involved in the women's game, like you, gives us huge support as well. As much as you want it, you don't always get it, but it's great that we feel like we are obviously progressing year on year. And I said 14 games plus the cup final on RT as well is absolutely massive, and hopefully you can just keep improving and gives the visibility to young girls. And as I said, we're every young girl or every player in the league is putting volunteers, managers, coaches, chairpersons, people involved in the club. There's huge time and commitment put in, and it just maybe I suppose it's just reward for that as well. And everybody deserves that coverage and extra media coverage as well. So
just to follow up on that, Breifne, just before, because you said something there, I couldn't be remiss in not having it on the show. I'm talking about the likes of Eddie Cullen and Eddie and Dave Casson, the work that's gone in, even John Flood, off the field, the work that's gone in Wexford. Like, for a club that's not necessarily, I would say, part of the big mainstream, where the Dublin clubs who maybe have the sponsors, the backing of that, like the work that's had to go into the back of Wexford to make sure that you girls could be successful. Like, I don't think that'll ever be recognised.
No, it never will. And I don't, like, I obviously don't want to mention too many names because I'm of fear of leaving people out, but there is a lot of special people in the club in Wexford, and I suppose Eddie Cullen definitely deserves a special mention. He is one unbelievable man. He doesn't miss any trainings as much as we have to train. He is there an hour before every single training session, bringing all the gear, setting up. He has food in the dressing room laid out for us. These are labels on bottles for us. He waits then after till we spend ages in the dressing room, change and shower and chatting, and he just waits patiently outside. We'll clean up, like obviously take home whatever he's put out for us, and wash jerseys, pick up, gear left behind, and he's Eddie's a complete volunteer, and that Wexford would not be the same without him, and he definitely deserves a special mention. I'm sure he's well known. He just never looks for any praise or anything like that. Just gets on with everything, and he always kind of stands aside and casts an eye over everybody, and looks after everybody. So he's a great man, and as I said, we're very lucky to have Eddie and other people likes of John Flood, Dave Casson, who've been kind of around since the start, and in recent years, Lizzie's been involved a lot. Stephen Quinn is massive in the club at the moment as well, with underage setups, and Alan Brown has done a lot of work in recent years as well to try and make the club a little bit more sustainable. Obviously, we've had good periods throughout the year where we might have had extra funding for 1 year, or different things for maybe a year, but at the moment now it's all about trying to make it a lot more sustainable. So we're very lucky to have good people in there, and it's trying to move Wexford in the right direction, and you're not offer players something for 1 year and not being able to do it next year. So they're big on that. So if they're offering us something, they plan on continue then for the next couple of years. So you can obviously see with the development of the underage in the club, we have an academy that obviously has a link with Celtic as well, and we have kind of underage setups now for all the age groups, kind of building up the senior as well. So I suppose Wexford has made huge progress without being, I suppose, a big name club, or sometimes our location doesn't help for funding and backing as well. And so I said we're very lucky to have great people in the club, and we're progressing forward in the right direction, hopefully.
For a woman that says she's taking a clean break from the sport, you're saying we and us a lot.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the international side of your career because, there's that one senior international, but I think you're probably one of the most capped underage players through the ranks at that time, back when they played probably less games than they do now. But also, World University Games was on that CV as well. Talk to me about the kind of the whole international aspect of your career and kind of how it went. And I suppose you came from outside the capital as well, which generally it's much harder to get in when you're from that neck of the woods. What did it mean to you? What did it mean to you to play for Ireland, basically?
It took a while to, kind of break into the setup. I had gone for trials maybe under 14, 15, 16 maybe, and got rejected, I suppose, a lot, or got cut maybe the last one or two positions. Or that happened to me a few times where I might have been in the last 22 and I got cut down to 18 and got dropped. So it was difficult for a while, and I think it was Marie Price-Bulger who actually gave me my first opportunity with the under-17 international team, and then Sue Ronan was the under-19 international manager. So like you said, I kind of built up a good few caps at underage level, and it was obviously a huge honour to play for your country, and especially the first time, I think you remember, stand out and pitch, listen to national anthem, it's absolutely huge. Obviously got a lot of caps underage. I would have hoped to, progress that into the senior level a lot more. I've just obviously got the one cap that you've mentioned against the United States of America, and as mentioned before, maybe when I was talking to you beforehand, it's kind of, I don't know how I feel about it. It's kind of like I'm proud in one sense, and maybe I'm disappointed in another sense. It's nice to say that you have one cap, even if it is only one, and I only came on the pitch for maybe 1 to 2 minutes, didn't even touch the ball. But I suppose no one knows that. Maybe look up and say you have one cap, and you have the physical cap as well, and I've celebrated there for the 50th anniversary. So in some sense you do feel proud, and then on the other side I'm disappointed that maybe I didn't achieve more when I was maybe at the prime of my career. Whenever people viewed that to be, I do feel like I was good enough to get more caps, and I feel like when I see some players who have achieved 30, 40, 50 caps, I do feel like I was good enough to, or as good as some of those players. And I don't really know the reason why like other players weren't looked at more, or maybe didn't get more opportunities in the squad. But it is something I'm maybe disappointed with, and I suppose it's kind of like bittersweet whether I'm happy with the one cap or I'm not happy. So
we spoke about this briefly off air, and I think to be fair, I said it to you off air and I'll say it again on air, is that's imposter syndrome. Like, I think your instinct about the players of your era who got dozens or maybe 20, 30, even 40, 50 caps, you were equal to them on the pitch when you faced off against them at different levels, domestically and whatever. I definitely feel you deserve more caps, but then you're one of a number of players who just maybe didn't get, the face didn't fit for whatever reason, and the manager didn't think you had it. But I think the statistics would back up, and the records and the CVs at retirement would definitely back up that you deserved every cap you got. And I for one would be very proud of having been involved with your development in a very, very small way at 18 years of age for a year or two, right through to watching you take the field in San Jose that day. It was a huge honor for me, having played a tiny part in your development. In fact, I probably learned more from you than you ever learned from me as a coach. But it was I think take pride in it. It will be my advice back to you, is to say you earned that cap and you deserved every bit of it, if not more.
Yeah, I suppose you have to look at that. You've won more than a lot of people who also deserve it as well. And I know so you suppose you could talk about what you think of the setups and how different things are done over the years, from different, there's all loads of different opinions on it. And obviously the one cap I do have, it was a great trip that I got lucky to be picked for a good trip. It was obviously played in a massive crowd in front of the US obviously team, who were hugely popular. It was like they were celebrities compared to us, and even though yet they were playing on, that was their team, and our team was they were just levels apart. So that was a great eye opener as well. And so it was a nice experience to be involved in that sense, whatever way the cap came about, but it was obviously a nice experience.
Right, I'm going to say this, Breifne. He's probably going to land me in trouble, but I don't care. One thing for me over the number of years is I always felt that Wexford never got, as a whole, as a club, never got the full deserving in terms of international recognition, because even when they were going so well, they'd struggle at times to get players in squads. And it was one thing that I always looked at, and it's like, if they're in the capital, would they be in the squad? And that's, to me, something that I always looked at. Like, you look at it in their prime, Kylie, and as Nicola said, Kylie, you look at other players there, Ciara Rossiter didn't get as many as she probably should have. Like, it's just one of them that it's difficult when you look back on, as much as we see now players getting recognised a lot more. But I think the likes of this generation, it would have been nicer to see some of them more getting them. But as Breifne, as you've said, in terms of Nicola, like, yes, absolutely, cherish that one cap. A lot of people will never get one of them, and you know, that's the sort of thing that you look at, and it's like, you got there, you represented your country, and the thing is, you represent your country, and you were there on merit for the fact of you just come off an unbelievable season after winning your first league title.
Yeah, you could go around in circles about it all. Like, I don't know whether it is, you know, some people will say it's a Dublin versus outside the country thing, and you know, sometimes it comes down to the individual manager at a time, or different viewpoints, different opinions. But you know, like you said, I definitely think there was more players in Wexford that deserved an opportunity. We had some great players, and obviously, you know, we were very successful there for a couple of years in a row. I don't know the stats off by heart, or how many years, and you know, we won 4 trophies quite close together, I suppose, in the league and things like that. So you know, we had a lot of good players who never got looked in, or never were part of extended squads. Like you said, Kylie Murphy, you know, Edel Kennedy would, you know, there was at a time there was no one else you'd bring on to defend a lead or being a defensive player. You know, Carl Breen was very good at, you know, with us. You know, we won our first league. You know, we saw a lot of good players. Emma Hansbury, you know, Claire Reardon got in obviously eventually. You know, as I said, I'm probably leaving some people out here now because I've played obviously a lot of great players, but definitely I do feel over the years Wexford should have had more players in the squad, and like that squad I was involved in, I felt like it was, in one part, it was because we had just won a league and there was some players weren't released from their English clubs, and it kind of freed up a few positions, and it was almost maybe pressure from media, or pressure because Wexford had just won a league that a few players from Wexford need to be selected at the time, and it was myself, Ciara Rossiter and Jess Gleeson got into that particular squad, and you know, I was never recalled again.
There was actually 4 Wexford women in that squad. There was 4 Wexford women in that squad, and one of them didn't play, never got a cap. No, well, Emma, we'll give Emma honorary Wexford residency, but she's really a Sligo woman. No, there was another Wexford.
She joined after, yeah.
Do you know who the other woman was? Can you remember? Sub goalkeeper.
Oh yeah, Charlotte
McCormick. Yeah. She never got a cap.
That's right. Yeah,
Maeve the Burke won't like us saying this, but that game's. I'll always remember from Maeve's save on the line when she took a nice unfortunate.
Yeah, on her face.
I don't know how she didn't break her nose. I don't know how she didn't break her nose that day. Nicola, if you had to pick a highlight out of the last 20 years, both since the league is around in the last 13 or 14, and maybe the 5 or 6 years before that as well, what would it be? What's been the standout moment for you on the pitch over the last 2 decades?
Yeah, it's very difficult to pick. I actually think the last cup win in Tallaght Stadium was one of my best memories. I kind of mentioned earlier to you that I suppose enjoyment has come a lot more into it, and the people you're playing with, and you know, we had kind of maybe had a couple of year period there we hadn't won any silverware, and it was just, I don't know, it was just really special to win that last one. And it was kind of a mix of the players I've been playing with for 13 years or 12, 11 years at the time, but also a lot of new young players as well that we kind of felt like we took under our wing and brought along with us, and likes of Ellen, Eileen, you know, Della, you know, they're people that we've tried to, I suppose, instill what we believe is, you know, important in the club, and for them to learn from us and continue teaching girls that come behind them. So I think that one was really, really special for us, because I suppose we were such a close group, and it was a real mix of youth and experience. And as I said, we kind of had a dry spell there for a while, for a couple of years. So that was really, really special.
I have one, Breifne, I have one. The year you won the league in the playoff, for me, not because you won the playoff, because of what you actually done in that last couple of weeks. You're on the road Sunday, Wednesday, playing game after game, bodies on the line. I mean, I always remember when Adele Kennedy got injured in Galway, and you still had to go and play Shelbourne midweek. You had to go and force that playoff. That one to me was one that will always stand out in terms of Wexford.
Yeah, I think that year we had played. I think it was eight games in 4 weeks, maybe like that. A weekend Wednesday, and I suppose we had chances to win the league earlier than. I think we had to kind of take a draw up in Galway, and maybe we lost, and then we had to go play Shelbourne. I think we actually lost 3-0 or 3-1 maybe, which they forced the playoff. So that was a very tough period with the amount of games in such close proximity, and obviously losing important players to injuries as well. So I can still recall a picture of us walking off the pitch in Shelbourne after losing that game in Tolka, knowing that it was going to a playoff. Still stands out in my mind. Our dejected faces, not knowing where we were going to get the energy from to obviously go to a playoff after playing the 8 games in 4 weeks. But yeah, I suppose you're right, Aaron. That was a big moment as well and we had obviously went behind in the playoff as well, and we came back obviously to win that. So yeah, that was a great year as well.
Momentum is huge and stuff like that. Well, listen, Nicola, I've no doubt the number of times you said we and us means that we won't be too long before we see you back in some way, shape, or form in the league. It's been a pleasure watching you develop and excel through the league over the last 13, 14 and longer years. So thanks for joining us. We've held you way longer than we asked you to, so appreciate your generosity of your time this evening. And listen, enjoy your retirement, and hopefully we'll see you back on a sideline relatively soon, either on a dugout or maybe behind the fence, just cheering on your teammates, former teammates now, unfortunately.
Yeah. Hopefully sometime in the future. Well, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate your time.
Nicola Sinnott there, joining us for half an hour, way longer than we anticipated, but one of the stars of the last 14, 15 years of the league, and for half a decade before that as well, with Raheny, Peamount, UCD as well. So humble as well. I mean, just looking back and even the little bit of kind of, I won't say insecurity, but maybe that little bit of imposter syndrome that exists around that international cap. And like, there's so many people in this country who would love to have one cap for Ireland, and she earned it, and she's kind of questioning whether she deserved it. And I think, well, we said it during the chat and previously and before the conversation on Monday night, but one of the good ones, I think, in the league.
Absolutely. Like you look at her when you in terms of the Patreons or the statues of the league, you've got her right up there with the likes of Karen Duggan, Kylie Murphy, Noelle Murray, Pearl Slattery, Rebecca Cray, them sort of players who've really been a staple of the league over a long period. And like I truly enjoyed chatting to Nicola in that sort of way, in a more relaxed way, because any other time I've sort of chat where it's been either media events or post game sort of stuff, and just to chat to her in that little way about her reflection on it. And like, I think when she looks back, I think she's going to be very proud of that career that she did have, because there's no doubt she's been an outstanding footballer, an outstanding person, an outstanding leader. One of the big presences of the league gone, and it's maybe a bit of time where we're seeing that bit of a changing of the guard with some of the older players coming out of the league. But listen, I don't think it'll be too long, as you said, before we see Nicola back in and around games, whether it be as a fan or maybe even, as you say, on the sidelines.
Yeah, gone, but not really gone. I think just maybe a little well-deserved break. We are so far over our hour that we're going to power through, though, with the fixtures for this weekend. I'm going to run through them. Keep it as quick as you can for the listeners, because I know they've got places to be and things to do. Bohs versus Galway. Bohs disappointed after last weekend. Galway in a bit of a high. Do Bohs need to bring it in the element on Saturday?
They need to show more than they showed last week. Yes, absolutely. Will they win this game? I don't think so.
Treaty United with a trip to DLR. They impressed last week against Waterford. DLR will be disappointed with that second half performance. Can Treaty get 2 wins on the bounce here? Can they see themselves edge up that table?
They can, but I can also see DLR getting something out of this game. I was now thinking, because of Russia Littlejohn's announcement, that I was going to go to Shamrock Rovers on Saturday, but I think I'm still going to stick with my original plan of heading along to the Bowl, because I think this could be a very good game of football, and it could go any number of ways, but I think it'll be a really good game of football. But I think Treaty should shed it.
first home game for New Girls Waterford against Shells. They don't come much bigger than that in terms of prestige and reputation in the Women's League of Ireland. Shells to spoil the party here at Waterford's first home game?
Yeah, I think Shells will have a bit of fire in the belly this week after last week's result of Shamrock Rovers. Your only fear is that if Shells come out and really throw the dagger into Waterford just because they've a bit sour after last week, it could be a long day for Waterford. But if they set up the way they set up last week, they could be competitive in the game early on, and Shells should see it out over the 90.
Cork City hosts Sligo. It's a long journey down to Turner's Cross from the showgrounds, but Sligo will be, I suppose, looking forward to kind of building on that start last week. First point in the bag. This is a fixture that both managers would have looked at on the fixture list and gone, we can win that. Who's going to edge it?
Sligo's last league win was.
Oh, it was in Turner's Cross.
In Turner's Cross. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a close game. I make Cork favourites, but Sligo could easily get a point out of it.
And we'll skip one for a minute and come back to wrap up the show. Wexford and Peamount, two of those teams kind of battling to stay in touch with the top teams in the league. It's going to kind of set their season up. If either side wins this, they could struggle going forward, particularly Wexford having lost last week.
Yeah, fully agree. I think Wexford need to sort of get a performance in off the back of that loss to Athlone for Peamount. Even if Peamount come away with a draw here, I think Peamount will be happy enough just settling into that league season. The interesting question on Saturday is, does Karen Duggan play, considering she was unnamed on the bench last week but an unused sub? So that's one to watch out.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what's going on there. Maybe a slight injury, just didn't want to risk her last week. Do they want to risk her against Wexford? Who knows? They do have Galway the week after. That might be a bigger priority. Shamrock Rovers in Athlone Town, Tallaght Stadium, Rowisha Littlejohn, first appearance for the club, we imagine, on Saturday. It's a big one. Athlone smarting from a really big win on TV. Some of the new girls absolutely clicking into gear. Some really impressive performances from their side. They've got the 3 work permits, we believe, rectified for this week, so they're going to have a full strength squad to pick from. It's a daunting first game for Rowisha Littlejohn. She has the ability to unlock a team like Athlone and play that kind of box-to-box midfielder, maybe not quite with the power that we've seen from her in recent years, but at this level, should she be winning this game, or should she be influencing this game in Rovers' favour?
Absolutely. She should be all over this game. She should have a handprint and everything good that Rovers do. She's probably the cog that they need in terms of experience. But I'm going to flip this a little bit. I'd say players like Maddie Gibson are like a bull, ready to go, having had to sit out last week. So I wouldn't be surprised if Maddie Gibson puts in one of their Maddie Gibson displays and Athlone Town win the game.
That's a big, big challenge. I'm just going back to last week's game against Wexford for Athlone. Who was in centre midfield for Athlone Town? I suppose looking at Izzy Groves, looking at Brady, Roisin Malloy, Isabel Ryan. Like, they're formidable opponents, particularly with some of the younger ones kind of coming in with that energy. That might be a kind of a kryptonite for a player who's at the stage of the career that Rowisha is.
The problem about this is that the pressure's all on Rowisha. Pressure's all on her. And players are going to be out to try and, I got one up on a current starting Irish international centre midfielder. So players are going to be out there, not saying players are going to be out to hurt her. Players are going to be out there to try and say, okay, I can get the better of you in these games. I think there's a bit of pressure on Rowisha in this spell with Shamrock Rovers, and it'll be one that we'll be watching with a keen eye.
I have to say, though, of all the players in the game around the Irish setup and the Irish league and the Irish international team, if there's any player who can handle pressure and just let it run off her like water for duck's back, I think it's Rowisha Littlejohn. I think she's going to be.
What? I absolutely love Rowisha. I've spoke to her so many times, and and even just her attitude around certain things when it comes to big moments, big pressure. It's nearly as if it comes down one shoulder and just goes completely off, and it's like, pressure. Wow, we'll go. Let's do it. But the interesting thing is, and I'm curious about what culture or what she tries to bring to Shamrock Rovers, because she talked after the Wales loss in the Aviva about Irish football needing to reset and needing to do a lot of things. I wouldn't be surprised if she tries to put some influences on Shamrock Rovers off the field in terms of the younger players as well, that will help them, will benefit them massively going forward.
Oh, I agree. In the same way as Anya and Steph and Rihanna Jarrett are involved with underage international teams, I think it's an opportunity for her to come in and be part of that. I suppose setting up Bob Shamrock Rovers. I know it's a third season, but that kind of the culture that they're going to look to emulate over the next decade or so, and she really has an opportunity and a kind of a no more than Anya and Steph, she brings that kind of gravitas within the game in this country to really be an influence on those youngsters coming through. We heard Hannah Dingley talk about inspiring and empowering these girls to stay involved in the sport, and the opportunity, if you're 15, 16, 17, looking at going, well, if I break into that first team and getting a chance to play with not just one, but two players who went to the World Cup 18 months ago is absolutely huge. Aaron, we're way over time. That's all we've had time for this week. Thank you so much to everyone, to Nicola Sinnott, who gave so much of her time. She was a fantastic interview. Aaron, of course, as always, for being available, and to Hannah Dingley and everyone involved in that section of the show as well. Thanks to everyone who facilitated all of that. We'll be back next week. If you like what we're doing, do give us a follow wherever you're watching it, whether it's on our socials or on our website or whatever. We look forward to chatting to you again next week. We shall talk to you then. See you.